Born into perhaps the most famous wrestling family in history, Owen Hart spent much of his career fighting to establish himself as more than simply Bret Hart's younger brother. He became an outstanding technical wrestler, a world-class tag team competitor, a King of the Ring winner, and a multi-time champion, and one of the most beloved personalities in the wrestling business. From his training in the Hart Dungeon and early years in Stampede Wrestling, through his success in Japan, his rise in the WWE, and of course his rivalry with his brother Bret Hart, his championship victories, his time in the Hart Foundation, and of course his rivalry with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and ultimately the tragic events of May 1999. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Legends and Champions, and welcome to the life and career of the King of Harts, Owen Hart. I am Stefan Bennett with Mike McGuire. Welcome again, Mike.
Thank you, Stefan.
Just before we get into this one, I've been really looking forward to this one. I just want to remind everyone, if you want to get involved with Celebrate Wrestling, head over to our Facebook page, just search Celebrate Wrestling and just click to join. It's that simple. And you can get involved with all the chat, leave us your views, your questions, get involved with like-minded fans. And as Andy and I used to always say, it's a no-jerk zone, so feel free to join and enjoy yourself. So, Mike, we've mentioned Owen a few times over the last sort of few weeks where we've discussed other members of the Hart Foundation. He was born in 1965 in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and obviously he was the youngest son of Stu and Helen Hart. He grew up in professional wrestling, but he had reservations about getting into that business, didn't he?
Yeah, my understanding, and again, this is just from the things we've heard and seen throughout the years, and mostly by other people, although they did do a biography on him that did have some clips of him. Yeah, he kind of had seen the best and the worst of what the wrestling business had done to his family, but at the same time, he was good at it and there was money there, so why not go for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he excelled as an amateur wrestler and athlete before committing into the family business, so to speak. And he chose to be trained under his father at Stu Hart in the infamous Hart Dungeon. And, you know, the Dungeon's grueling training methods that have, you know, recognised worldwide to have produced some of the best and toughest wrestlers in the business. And Owen really developed and took to it very naturally. But what always stands out with me, and I want to get your opinion on this one, is Owen wasn't successful just because he was a Hart. You know, the name and the family obviously opened a few doors for him, but it didn't get him through the Dungeon. He was treated like everybody else. And all the stuff I've seen in interviews and that I've heard is the fact that he earned that respect from those around him. Nothing was just handed to him.
That was kind of the way it went for all the brothers, to what I know, is that, you know, even though you were by name the promoter's kid, the promoter's kids all worked. You know, Bret goes back to telling stories about selling programs. Every time we walk in the pavilion, he still talks about standing there being a kid selling programs and being afraid of the wrestlers, and then eventually going in and training and learning how to make stuff connect. And for Owen, I mean, after all the success that his family had, and at the same time had lost in some ways, there was an opportunity for him to really prove himself in a way that obviously benefited him further in his career. And by that, I mean, he probably had some of the most pressure on him, especially being the last son, you know, being the last one to really get in there and try his ply at it as one of Stu's kids. So after seeing what his brothers have been able to do in different degrees of success, the pressure for him to succeed was definitely on.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe he made his debut in Stampede Wrestling. Was it in 1986? Am I right?
Sounds right.
In the ballpark there, yeah. And he established himself as one of the promotion's brightest stars, and his list of accomplishments as British Commonwealth Midweight Champion, North American Heavyweight Champion, International Tag Team Champion, and going also to gain that invaluable experience over in Japan primarily in New Japan Pro Wrestling. His time abroad and around the world kind of just helped him develop into a complete performer, capable of combining his technical ability with his athleticism, aerial ability, all of that. And maybe his earlier years in Japan and indeed Stampede Wrestling are often overlooked because a lot of people, especially over here in the UK, and that we didn't really have any exposure to Owen and how good he already was until he made that transition into the WWE. By the time he wrestled, he looked very polished. I mean, you saw there was someone there. It was just kind of one of those things that happens in WWE where, you can have all the talent in the world. You could be one of the best performers in the world, but it doesn't mean that they're going to book you like you're one of the best in the world, as we know.
Well, here's what Owen did right. Owen did train, obviously, with Stu and in the dungeon, and his brothers showed him the ropes, but Owen left Stampede and Owen went to places like the UK and he went to Japan and he got experience that his brothers didn't always even get to the degree that he did because he would spend more time there and he would work different types of matches. So while a lot of his brothers really focus on building themselves in Calgary and then, maybe going down to work with the Funks or USWA or places like that, Owen really, really branched out, and that's what made him so different was he had all these extra styles in his pocket when he came back, and rather than just relying on solid technical wrestling, he also brought in his own sense of acrobatics and his own sense of agility and just a totally different style that set him apart from his brothers.
That was one of the things when I see him, he definitely had all the styles that he brought, set him aside from the others. And he debuted in the World Wrestling Federation in 1988 as the Masked Blue Blazer character. That character, though, it allows him to show. It was a character that allowed him to showcase that incredible athleticism. Although it was never a major headline act, it wasn't one of those which was booked to be anything more than what it was.
I disagree. I'll say this because being a kid and watching the Blue Blazer show up, that's who it was made for. This was made for kids. So, was he going to go all the way to the title with that gimmick? Probably not. But man, I remember when the Blue Blazer showed up, all the kids could talk about was the Blue Blazer. Yeah, you talk about Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and those guys, but Blue Blazer, man, talk about capturing imaginations and really drawing attention. So I think that gimmick, even though it would get made fun of later, really did something for Owen as far as just getting him noticed in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things when I look back now and you can tell that it's Owen in the Blue Blazer, but you knew when he had both his arms raised in the air, it was in a certain way. Owen Hart had one where you look at it, you go, oh yeah, that's Owen Hart. But he did briefly depart the company and return, I think it was in 1991, which he then formed the tag team High Energy, an issue with Coco Beware, the Birdman. They didn't capture the tag titles, but they were they became quite popular with fans. And again, I think that helped contribute to Owen being cemented as one of the most exciting young performers that the company had at the time. And it was at that time he then was contributed the name The Rocket. Now, I remember WrestleMania 8 where he had the match against Skinner. It was showing that athleticism, seeing him come more out of his shell. That was the thing when you watched him then. You was like, well, this guy really does have something. For me personally, watching him at a young age, I thought to myself, genuinely saw someone that I would have expected to maybe in and around the Intercontinental Championship picture within a few years, which would ultimately end up happening. When you saw the Rocket Owen Hart, did you see something there that you thought, well, actually, yeah, this guy, may end up having a really good future? Maybe it's not just because he's a Hart.
Again, not knowing as a kid how wrestling even worked around the world. Like you, I grew up watching WWF and maybe a little WCW when it came on. The idea of going to Japan and Mexico and England and all these places was completely lost on me. I had no idea this was happening. So it wasn't until I remember looking at Owen's career for an episode, I think of McGuire on Wrestling or something, just going into Owen's history, and I think it's important noting that even though his time as the Blue Blazer in WWF was short, he did tour with that gimmick. And so he would take it around. And one of the matches that we're talking about this year in 2026 as being a big success was how Owen lost his mask. He actually lost a mask versus mask match against a guy named Kinect in Mexico. And it was not talked about to the degree that we hear about some other mask versus mask matches. But that was Owen basically deciding to step out of the fear of being known by his name and going out and saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to be Owen Hart. So when Owen Hart showed up on the scene in the WWF, and yeah, you know, the tights were similar in design, but that was about it as far as like the actual physical style of them. It would be talked about how he was the younger brother of the Hitman, but we didn't really see him in that same light yet. So yeah. What did I think of Owen Hart? Honestly, I was probably more excited for the Blue Blazer than I was for Owen Hart as a kid.
But a defining time of his career started to, what really catapulted his career in the World Wrestling Federation began late 1993. He was accidentally eliminated during a Hart family match at Survivor Series, as we briefly touched on before. And Owen blamed Bret for the team's problems. And the attention exploded at the Royal Rumble in 1994 after Owen teamed with Bret to take on the Quebecers for the World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Champions. Bret had, from what we saw, was struggling with a knee injury that would go on to affect his performance in the Royal Rumble later in the night, although he would end up becoming a joint winner with Lex Luger, another thing that's been discussed on our channels. And the infamous Owen kicking Bret's leg out of his leg comment. But this was that promo, despite the hiccup with that comment, this was where you really saw Owen, like Owen was just out and let it all go. That was the moment where something in me as a fan switched, and I was like, wow, Owen's really got something here. And I remember Ted DiBiase being on commentary with Vince McMahon on this, and DiBiase's commentary and the comments he made about Owen having enough and really praising him for this. This was something which I had gone from thinking, you know, Owen's really, really good, to then going, oh, Owen could be great here. This was the point where it was all about Owen wanting to step out of Bret's shadow. That was kind of one of the themes that I think that was going on there.
So let's rewind a little bit here and go through this, because this is a segment of wrestling that I have drilled into core memory, because I've probably rewatched these tapes 1,000 times in my life, because that's all I would watch was the Bret Owen feud. And I watched it so much. So going back to the Survivor Series, it was the Hart brothers against what was supposed to be Jerry Lawler and his Knights. Lawler got into a little bit of trouble and was pulled away from the company for a while. So Shawn Michaels took the spot. And like you said, Owen got eliminated in the Survivor Series match. He was the only Hart brother to get eliminated. You had Bruce and Keith in there as well. And this is when Bret was also rocking the short singlet style tights. And you had this situation where they started planting the seed early of some dissension between the brothers. And yeah, kid brother Owen being jealous and a little bit of shoving. Then it was around the holiday season. They start cutting these promos. Bret and Owen are arm in arm, you know, like shoulder over shoulder, and chip off the old block. Like Owen even does the little, you know, fist off the chin thing on Bret. You know, it's like my big brother Bret, and you know, everything's great between the Hart family, and you know, the Rocket and the Hitman are in the line, and Bret even said, and the Rockets, or Owen even said, the Rocket's going to soar, and I'll have my brother, the Hitman, right behind me. And so even then you could see, okay, we're starting to build something here. Then you go to the Royal Rumble in January, and you have the tag team match where they lose, and they lost because Bret had basically had his leg completely obliterated. Bret's trying to get up to his feet. Owen's screaming at him the whole time. The big kick, and nobody can believe it. And you fast forward to what would eventually become Bret declining the opportunity to fight his brother.
Yeah.
He refused to fight his brother.
I loved everything about the beginning of this feud, from those early plants of the seeds there, where even in the pre-match interview, where Owen is like saying, there's no problem here, it's all good, and he would say to Bret, I'm going to make you so proud, and even when they're walking out together to the ring, you just knew. But it was that moment where he kicks Bret's leg. That was the moment which, it shocked me, and I still remember thinking, wow, okay, like, this is huge, because it was a personal thing. You didn't see it as a kid, you didn't see a brother dynamic of two falling out like that on that scale before. I just never saw that. So for me, it was a huge deal. Plus, being a huge Bret fan at the time, it was a massive, massive deal.
The best part too is that the referee had stopped the match at the Rumble. So, as we often say about the best heels, they're often right. There's always a shred of them being right for being mad. No heel that's really worth their salt is ever 100% in the wrong here. So Owen was losing his big opportunity, and it was because Bret couldn't go and he didn't make the tag, and he's yelling the whole time, all he had to do was tag me.
Just tag me, Bret. Yeah. But that's the thing as well. Owen was honest, because no matter how many times you watch that back, there were opportunities for Bret to tag, and he didn't tag. And when I watched that back for the first time, because I had it taped, and I was looking at the match over and over again, and I looked at, and that was the point, as a Bret Hart fan, I was thinking, oh, Owen's right. I'm thinking, well, Bret, you could tag him here. Bret, you could tag him there. And he didn't. And he obviously got more and more hurt to the point where he couldn't go on. It was for a kid like me to watch that unfold and think, oh, yeah, okay, I actually blame Bret here. Like, I don't actually understand why he didn't tag Owen. Did he not trust Owen to be able to hold his own? Is that what it was? These are the questions that start being asked. But ultimately, it would lead to the first match with WrestleMania 10. What an opener. Now, I've mentioned to you over the last couple of weeks, this is one of my favourite WrestleMania matches of all time. One of my favourite matches, full stop, of all time. Owen versus Bret. Bret already booked into a main event opportunity for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. What a night for Bret, and what pressure to face your brother, something you didn't want to do, and know that later on you've got an opportunity to win the title again.
Well, it was a great stipulation, too, because they had worked it out where after Bret and Lex were both ruled to have won the Royal Rumble, that they would each get an opportunity at the championship, but whoever got to go first wouldn't have to do a makeup match because they would get the first title match of the night. And then presuming if they won, they would defend the title. So that would be their second match. Whereas whoever got the later match, they would have to do a makeup match. And that's where the makeup match came in, and Bret and Owen happened. The great thing about this, too, was that Owen had been such a little thorn in the side that Bret, like I said, was refusing. And then finally, after, calling him out enough, Bret said, you know what, I'll give him. And this is my favorite time to do my Bret Hart impression, because this is the line I always remember. It's like, he wants a fight. I'll give him a fight. I'll give him a damn good fight.
That's bloody brilliant.
Right?
That is really, really good. That really is good. Oh, applause for Mike there.
Thank you very much. Yes.
That is really, really, really good. And and that was the thing as well, because the replayability of this match is, if you love just pure wrestling, just in-ring ability between two people, this is the sort of match you'll never get tired of, no matter how many times you watch it. Owen going over was a shock at the time, because you're thinking, well, what state of mind's Bret going to be in? Is this going to, then what happens? Does Owen then become number one contender by default, because he's if Bret becomes champion, because he's already been the champion tonight? But what I love what I thought was a really, really cool cliffhanger was the ending of WrestleMania 10. Brett wins the title. Everyone's in the ring applauding him. You've got him up on shoulders. I love how animated Randy Savage is. Macho Man is in the ring, where Owen comes down the aisle and sort of stands there watching, and Randy Savage is sort of inviting him in. He's like, come on, come in, be with your brother and all this. And Owen's like, no, he's just fixated on this moment. And Owen knows, I've got you. I've got one over you already. Like, I can take this. And that, because he won that match, you don't look at Owen the same way ever again. It's not like he's inferior to Brett. He's not quite at Brett's level. He's just a bit off it, maybe. You know, Brett's got more experience. But because of the way he wrestled Brett, and he really took it to Brett, and the way he won, you all of a sudden, you take Owen very seriously, and you look at him and they think, wow, like this, he's a threat.
Well, we talked about it last week when we talked about the British Bulldog, how Brett and Owen is, to this day, in my mind, still the best brother versus brother feud to ever be pulled off in wrestling. And again, it was all the baby steps that got us there, because like you said, now we know that Owen can beat Brett. Brett's the champion. This is automatically lining up reasons beyond just contendership for Owen to go after the title. Contendership almost didn't matter. You know, when it came down to it, it all came down to Owen just wants to ruin Brett's life. And as a kid, and again, as a fan, this is what ate me up, and I got the story, and I bought it hook, line, sinker. I was in for it all the way.
King of the Ring, just 1 year after Brett wins, becomes the inaugural King of the Ring in terms of the pay-per-views. Owen takes the crown. Therefore, we now have the King of Harts. We have the King of the Ring, Owen, which is a huge thing going into their match at SummerSlam 1994 for the title. Steel cage match. You've already mentioned in the past couple of weeks that this is your favourite steel cage match. The traditional old blue steel barred cage, still the best type of cage in my opinion.
Well, and that's SummerSlam 94. That's where I remember seeing those video packages the most, and that's where the he wants a fight. That's where it comes from, is because they do that whole recap. Because this is in the day they weren't lowering the cage from the ceiling; they had to fill 20 minutes to get the cage built. So they would give you the entire story by way of video packages, and then this match happens in such a way where the match is definitive. Brett wins with a last second, they're both on the outside of the cage, and Owen's leg gets hooked and Brett jumps to the floor and everybody's happy. But then we see the sneak attack from Anvil on Bulldog, and then they're locking Brett in the cage and they're beating him up, and now all the brothers are trying to climb in, and it's just pandemonium. So again, it was just adding more fuel to the fire and showing just how dastardly Owen could be, and how Neidhart was in his ear during this whole time. So again, as far as laying out a story, even as simple as it was, it really was brilliantly done. And the reason why I love this cage match so much is for two reasons, if I can just go into it.
Of course.
One, Owen had a phenomenal version of the sharpshooter. I would often say that Owen's sharpshooter was even better than Brett's in some ways, because he seemed to get lower. But this was the match where, for the first time in life, like some sort of magic trick, Owen Hart would have the sharpshooter reversed on him by Bret Hart. So now Bret's the best brother ever, because he knows how to get out of the sharpshooter. Again, yum, 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 yum. I'm just eating all this up, right? And the other thing I loved about this cage match, it goes like 40 minutes. Not a drop of blood, and it didn't need it. This is one match, a cage match, where I would rarely say you didn't need the blood, because they were literally grinding each other into the ground. It was nuts.
I was away on holiday with my grandparents. My dad had phoned, because back then we didn't have mobile phones. And I remember my dad saying, "Oh, when you come home tomorrow, you've got SummerSlam to watch. I've taped SummerSlam for you." And I was like, "Oh, this is brilliant," because I knew it was Bret Owen. I knew it was Undertaker versus Undertaker, although I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. And I was so excited. And I remember the following day going home and sitting down and watching it. And I remember this was the first match I ever watched as a kid where I sat there, I was on the edge of my seat. I broke out in a sweat because I just couldn't call how this was going to end up. Then you had the dynamics of Anvil and Davey having issues at ringside and how they were going to potentially get involved. And I remember sitting there and I was a nervous wreck because I cared, because not only was I already an established Bret Hart fan, I was growing to really love to hate Owen. And that was the thing. I had got this affinity for Owen Hart as well, where I wanted to see him do well, but there was that part of me that was tugging on my heartstrings thinking, oh, but not at the expense of Bret, you know? But I remember I broke out in a sweat, and when the match was over, I still couldn't believe. I remember rewinding it back and watching it again, just that entire match from start to finish.
So here's where it gets even crazier for me, and I don't know what it was like in the UK, but there's a whole generation of us that all remember watching pay-per-views without watching the pay-per-view. And by that, I mean, you could go to the channel that the pay-per-view was on and you could listen to it, but the picture would be scrambled. You could also do that with other programs that were on pay-per-view, wink nudge, but I remember you'd get, like, every once in a while, you get a couple seconds of a semi-clear shot of something. And that was when I saw the reversal of the sharpshooter. And that was when I became obsessed with having to see this match. So we couldn't afford pay-per-view at the time, but as soon as it came out on video, my mom actually ordered me the VHS. And this is back when VHS in 1994 still was coming in at like $90 US. So that's an insane amount of money to own a wrestling tape. But that's what it was. And I still have that original copy. And then I bought a copy off of my buddy Vinny B up in Edmonton, who he's gotten into collecting WWE VHS tapes now. And he had an extra SummerSlam 94. So I was like, I need another one. But yeah, so like I said, I live and die for that show because it's one of my favorites ever. But yeah, we should probably move on from this because we're spending an awful lot of time on 94 here. But it was really one of the big turning points for Owen. So,
yeah, I'll mention what you said about when you used to be able to hear the audio, even though the signal was scrambled for picture. I can't remember. I think it might have been 98 or 99. It was when they had, I think it was Undertaker versus Stone Cold, the first blood match. And I was at my buddy's that summer, and he was meant to have ordered it, but something had happened, it didn't go through or whatnot. So I remember we sat there with just the audio on. So we're literally doing our own thing, but we've got the audio on and we're listening to like the main event play out. So I know what you mean by that. But I used to have on the Royal Rumble 94, what I used to do sometimes, because I was obsessed, I had this cassette record player, and I used to put it next to the TV, and I would leave the bedroom and leave it to record the audio from the television. I had the Royal Rumble 94 on cassette tape just to listen to the whole event back. Yeah, I remember I used to find out exactly where it stopped, and then I would have to then flip the cassette over and then go rewind back to that moment just where so it picks up from where it left off. And yeah, that's I had the entire thing on cassette tape.
These kids have no idea.
I had my Walkman. I used to, people were listening, on my toes would have a break from like Metallica and Iron Maiden and that. I'd be listening to, what are you listening to? Royal Rumble 1994. What?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. But anyway, moving on from that, obviously Owen was unsuccessful, and this though did show that Owen could be a main eventer, without a shadow of a doubt. Now we'll fast forward to, and I've mentioned this match before. We move on. Bret goes on, and there's this rivalry that starts again with Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund was a former World Wrestling Federation champion in the 80s, etc., and lost the title. Then we've got Bret versus Bob Backlund in this submission match. Now, Backlund's really building up how dangerous and inescapable the crossface chicken wing is. Owen's there. You've got Davey with the towel in Bret's corner. And Davey obviously gets taken out of the equation. Poor Davey at ringside during this feud, and he took some beatings, didn't he, Davey? But this is where I literally, for the first time, looked, and I think I called Owen, you despicable SOB, because he breaks down in tears to Stu and Helen. He's pleading with them. That's my brother in there. Please, you've got, Brett's in absolute agony. He's wrapped up in this crossface chicken wing. I mean, the drama is off the scale. Again, I'm sweating. I'm like, oh, what is going on? I start getting emotional because Owen's crying. I'm being caught hook, line and sinker. I'm buying into what Owen's doing here. Well, he's manipulating us kids at this time. And then once the towel is thrown in, it all comes out. Owen manipulated and deceived. I was seething, but at the same time, I was like, Owen, you're an absolute you're a genius. You masterminded that brilliantly. What did you think of Owen when this moment finally happened? Because obviously we're starting to learn to hate Owen because he's become in a top heel in the company. But that moment, because of how personal, you've got Stu and Helen pulled into the equation. I mean, what was that like for you when you saw this whole performance, should I say, from Owen?
This was such a weird thing because you had the championship on the line. You had Owen pleading. You had Bob Backlund, who even then already seemed so out of date and out of touch, right? But the story wasn't about Bob getting the championship. The story was about Owen, again, doing what he could to elongate the feud with his brother. And we saw that because Backlund would lose the title the next night to Diesel at Madison Square Garden.
It was a house show, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was home video footage that they showed to have the stuff air on TV, right? But I remember watching that, and again, being a kid that fell for all this stuff, thinking maybe Owen's trying to make amends here. Maybe he really feels bad. And then, of course, the towel gets thrown in, and you see Owen show his true colors. So, I mean, as a kid, it did exactly what it was supposed to. Made me hate Owen more. Made me feel bad for Brett. But what was really weird about it then is that the championship was not a factor anymore. And we would see that play out as time would go on as well.
Yeah. And then a little shortly after all of this as well, Owen would then form his career started to really thrive in the company, and he ended up teaming with Yokozuna, another former World Wrestling Federation champion, which was a mismatch made in heaven. You had Yokozuna, this humongous, powerful guy, former world champion, and then you had Owen that had the technical ability, the agility. He was a high flyer. They complemented each other so well at first. They became WWF Tag Team Champions. They defeated the Smoking Guns in September of 1995. And the partnership really helped keep showcasing Owen with what he could do. We know Yokozuna's career starts to dwindle. He's getting bigger. Unfortunately, his health is deteriorating. But I think Owen deserves an enormous amount of credit here, with the way he not only still managed to keep Yokozuna successful with his struggles, but it showed that Owen can be put into kind of any situation and make it work and thrive in that environment.
It was a real odd couple because Yoko was brought in as Owen's mystery partner to challenge for the title. A lot of people thought it was going to be Brett. I remember this going, well, what, are they getting back together? And it just turned into this strange pairing of Owen Hart and Yokozuna. And like you said, they would have a little bit of success. Then they would drop the titles. Yoko would start facing some different problems and issues and eventually, faded out. But this would cement Owen again as someone who was known on the roster. I mean, you're with Jim Cornette and Mr. Fuji. You can't get more heel than that in WWF in the day. So this proves Owen is a bad guy. Anybody that wants to work with Owen is a bad guy. And that includes Yokozuna to a point. And then it includes his own brother-in-law who decides to join Camp Cornette. And that helped Davey a lot. We talked about how it re-entered the title picture for him with those In Your House, Beware of Dogs, especially. And Owen was once again being a distant foil to Brett, even indirectly. So it kept everybody close, but at the same time kept Owen solidified as that heel that he needed to be.
When the discussion comes up about the company's greatest tag team wrestlers, so not specifically just actual tag teams, but those who have been able to team, Owen's name doesn't get brought up. And I feel that his career as a tag team wrestler, the contribution he's made to tag team wrestling during his career, I think personally it gets overlooked, because if we're not looking at just tag teams as a team, but actual individuals that have formed various tag teams that have, been successful and contributed, and Owen's got to be right up there, in my opinion. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I could see that. Owen doesn't get talked about for a lot of reasons, and that's mostly because, WWE is basically under kind of a gag order not to with the lawsuit that happened with Martha. So at the same time, it's like, what do you do? Do you kind of laud him in offshoot shows like what we're doing now? Or do you wait for him to get the credible recognition? It's like we talked about with the Hall of Fame, right? Like, to some people, the Hall of Fame means everything, but realistically, it's just a marketing tool like everything else. So I think Owen's contributions as a tag wrestler are definitely worth noting and worth mentioning. I don't know if I'd put him as one of the greatest ever, because again, it was more tagging out of necessity. I always saw Owen Hart as a really good singles wrestler who just happened to have tag team success.
Yeah, I think that's one good way of putting it. I'd agree with you there. I think the Smoking Guns must have absolutely hated facing a tag team with Owen Hart in, because literally after, I think it was literally almost the same, I think it was September 1996, so the following year, exactly 12 months later, they dropped the titles again to Owen, but this time with Yokozuna. And obviously, Owen would then become successful with the tag
with
titles.
Bulldog this time, you mean?
With Bulldog. And then again in 97, defeating the bizarre pairing of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels. Within that time in 1996, he would become a double Slammy Award winner, picking up those which he would proudly carry around with him and parade and make a huge... And that's one of the things that I loved about Owen was, we forget about the Slammies a lot these days because they become kind of almost a nothing thing in the company in the later years. But with Owen took them and it was like, well, I've earned these and I'm going to showcase these. And he made them very much a part of his persona. Any opportunity he had to flash those off to the crowd and to basically bask in his glory of winning these 2 Slammy Awards.
Well, hold on. Okay, I got to throw a flag here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You keep saying winning these Slammy Awards.
You know, I know.
As a legitimate Slammy Award winner, I find offense to that statement. Okay. I do. And it's true. Slammy Award winner, Mike McGuire.
Okay.
Part of the best crowd Slammy Award winner for the Raw after WrestleMania 29. That was the best crowd Slammy. We won it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Slammy Award winner, Mr. Mike McGuire.
I have my award just around the car. I can go get it if you want. I have my actual Slammy Award.
Yeah, honestly, we need to get a picture of this up on with.
That's fine. That's fine. I can make that happen. See this. But I will go ahead and say this, and I'll say it now, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. My Slammy Award win is more legitimate than either of Owen Hart's.
Wow.
He stole one for the best bow tie. Best bow tie.
I know, but this is Owen Hart we're talking about. This is King of Harts, Owen Hart. I
don't care. Great wrestler, great thing. I miss him dearly. But my Slammy Award win is legitimate. Owen Hart's are not. And I will stand on that hill.
Wow. Well, there we go. We have a legit, ladies and gentlemen, Slammy Award winner on the show. There we go. Absolutely fantastic.
Maybe I should start introducing myself as that when I do McGuire and
I think from now on, that is how you now get introduced. So please welcome.
Hey, everybody. I'm Slammy Award winner Mike McGuire.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Absolutely. Why not?
I legit, because my buddies were with me at that show. So they went on sale once, the Slammy Award replicas at WWE Shop. So I ordered 3 of them, and I got plaques engraved with our names on them for the date and the award, because we are legitimate Slammy Award winners. So
that's it. That's brilliant. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
I'm jealous now because I want a Slammy.
You should be.
I don't know what for. Yeah, I am.
You should be.
So, well, there you
Slammy Award is a prestigious award, and that's why I will say Owen Hart, a great, great wrestler, but not a legitimate Slammy Award winner.
Well, on March 3rd, 1987, during a European Championship tournament final, Brett would go up against British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith in Berlin, Germany. But Davey Boy would beat Owen to become the inaugural World Wrestling Federation European Champion. One thing I noticed, obviously, we know about when they teamed, but they delivered together excellent matches, which, again, I still feel deserve far more recognition than they often receive. Do you think it's just a sign of the times now that the exposure, even though you can go back on and look back, the archives are there, or you can go on Netflix, you can go what used to be the network. When WWE do a lot of historical stuff, they don't tend to showcase any of these sort of iconic pairings a lot of the time. What do you think? Do you think that there's a lot of what the likes of Davey, Owen and that did that just it just never gets the recognition these days?
Well, again, I think we have to lean. I think we have to lean on what we've talked about before, and that is the fact that there was so much talent already at the time, and there was just so much going on, and it's just hard sometimes to remember everybody the same way. And so I don't think, again, that they're being slighted. Everybody has their favorite that they're going to say is being slighted, but I don't think it's intentional. I think just when you stack them up against everything else that was going on during the time, maybe it doesn't hold the same weight. And I think that's fair. It's not always fair to us fans that want to see the recognition for our favorites, but realistically, I mean, that's why we do shows like this. I mean, I'm letting you run wild with whatever we choose here. This is basically the Stefan Bennett, I want to talk about this guy or this girl or this event show. And it's through opportunities like this that we get to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. So take note, Cody Rhodes, if you ever say to me, Stefan Bennett, what do you want to talk about? I want to talk about the stuff that doesn't get talked about enough. And that's where we would go. But by 1997, Owen and Brett had reconciled, and together they became central figures in the newly reformed Hart Foundation alongside Davey Boy Smith, Jim Neidhart, and Brian Pillman. And the group became one of wrestling's most fascinating factions, and that, as we've touched on before, they were beloved heroes in Canada, and they were huge villains in the United States.
You want to talk about Owen's acting?
Yeah.
Okay. The whole reconciliation scene when Owen and Davey are tearing each other apart for the European title, and Brett gets in the middle, and I just watched this actually getting ready for this show again. I forgot that Brett goes in with a chair and he pins Davey down by the neck. He's got a chair across the neck of Davey because he knows Davey's so big, he's got to hold him down. And then he's telling them both to cool it. And Brett's talking about how, look at these people. They've torn us apart. This is what they want. This isn't what we want. And he's talking to Owen about who stood up for you against that teacher that used to push you around and everything. And Owen just starts literally weeping, talking about how much he misses his brother. And that hug was just, man, that was some great stuff. And you want to talk about things in Owen Hart's career that get overlooked. That was a moment.
It most certainly was, because when it happened, I'm like, okay, you fooled us already, Owen. Like, now, is this, there was at one moment where I actually thought, the thought crossed my mind that Owen was going to reconcile with Brett, but they were both going to turn on Davey. There was that brief moment that crossed my mind, and thankfully it didn't happen because we would get the Hart Foundation, and that's a good rivalries. You know, there was Austin, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Ken Shamrock, Legion of Doom, and Owen was so different from the rest of the faction because he had that charisma, the energy, and obviously the outstanding in-ring performances that he would bring along.
And he was still hateable.
And he was still
the thing.
hateable. Yeah.
People always loved Bulldog. People kind of always loved Anvil. Pillman was always a gray area, but people hated Owen. Owen was the hateable one in that faction.
He was so despised because the way he carried himself over those few years, he had earned that. And I think if you're going to play heel, Owen did it to the absolute best. And we could say it doesn't get talked about enough. Owen, during that period of time, between 94, when he snapped at Royal Rumble, to him finally becoming a face again after Bret had left in 97, that run he was probably go down as one of the best heels there ever was. And I think if someone was to say that, I think there's a very good argument for that to be the case, because no one quite performed that the way Owen did. I guess it makes it better because there was most of it was family involvement. So if you're screwing over your own family and your own parents and you're doing this to them, I think it just enhances that, just this guy just has no morals. He's got, he will do this to his own family. And that, I think, just sets it slightly separate from others. What I think with the Hart Foundation as a group, which I think made them so compelling, was their authenticity, because they weren't random teammates just thrown together. They're family members and close friends. Do you think, had the Montreal Screwjob not happened, how far do you think this faction could have gone beyond Survivor Series 97?
I think that the Hart Foundation had, to a degree, a limited run either way. I saw these guys either breaking up and going their own way again, or whatever happened. But I mean, the stuff with Bret and Shawn was so toxic that we would never know. It doesn't even cross my mind as a possibility now. So I don't know if it ever could have taken off. I mean, Shawn and Hunter were running the scenes backstage, if you listen to people that were there. And even when Owen came back as the Black Heart or the Lone Heart, like, he didn't really get a definitive revenge, and it was almost like he was kind of being punished for what went down with Bret. He came back as a fan favorite, sure, but then I don't know, it just turned really bizarre for him, and then they found a spot for him with the Ken Shamrock and the Dangerous Man thing, and eventually joining the Nation. But I don't know, that part of Owen's career was a victim of there being no more Hart Foundation. So without anybody in his corner, there was nothing really anybody could do about it. Bret was the enemy. Anybody that sided with Bret was the enemy, and anybody related to Bret was obviously the enemy. So Owen had to find a way to either keep working and making that money or get out of the company, and he chose to stay with the company. So sorry, that kind of doesn't answer your question, but I really do find it hard to imagine what would have happened for the Hart Foundation after that, because it's so far from my mind of even thinking as a possibility.
I mean, some of these things do cross my mind, because if circumstances had been different, if Brian hadn't been struggling the way he had, I like to think that maybe they would lasted maybe another year. I wonder how WrestleMania 14 would have shaped had Bret and that still have been around in the company. Would it still have been Austin versus Shawn Michaels, for example, for the title? What would have happened? But I guess things just happen for a reason. But I want to press on to one of the most significant rivalries in Owen's career was Stone Cold Steve Austin. And on the back of WrestleMania 13, where Austin would face Bret in one of the best matches in WrestleMania history, they've won a Hall of Fame award for the match in itself. This was a huge night, one of the key moments where there was that shift, where this is where fans were really, really started to buy into Steve Austin, the Stone Cold character, because he didn't tap out. He passed out because of the blood. That's now become an iconic visual now, with Brett locking on the sharpshooter and Austin refusing to tap out with Ken Shamrock as the referee, trying to, repeatedly asking Austin if he gives up, and you just see him all raising his head up in agony as the blood's dripping down until he just passes out. Off the back of that, Austin, then we have Canadian Stampede, and Austin, surprised to the shock of some, is eliminated by Owen Hart, and that becomes the next Owen, praise me, love me on this. I'm the man that pinned Stone Cold Steve Austin. Mm-hmm. And they would replay that in between each couple of clips. This match usually mainly gets talked about because of the injury sustained by Austin, the inverted pile driver that broke his neck, which was unfortunate, and the finish, which we've talked about before when we actually covered SummerSlam 97. So please go back and listen to that if you haven't. Do you think that it's unfortunate that a lot of people, when they discuss Owen Austin, they talk more about the injury as opposed to the fact that actually Owen Hart is one of the most important rivals that Austin had in his career?
He was and he wasn't. They were building that. And the Intercontinental Championship versus the, kiss my derriere stipulation in that match. Like I said, if you go back to that SummerSlam 97 show that you and I did, that match saved that show because it was not a good show up till then. So I don't know if we ever got the great rivalry before, and we didn't even get it afterwards because they would go in different directions. Owen was wearing the Owen 316 shirts after breaking Austin's neck, and the heat was always there, but we never really got that blow off between Austin and Owen. And Austin has gone on record saying that he didn't want anything to do with Owen Hart for the longest time because Owen never checked on him when he was in the hospital with the broken neck. So I don't know if I would say it was one of his greatest rivalries, but I mean, Owen was definitely responsible for a key moment in Austin's life and career for sure. But I don't know if he would be slated as one of the greatest rivals. Again, maybe if they had landed on it and stuck on it a little longer and had a big blow off and a series of rematches and whatnot, sure. But they had started something with Owen pinning him at Canadian Stampede, but they never really got the chance to finish it.
No, that's it. And I think with Austin, I think that was one of the things that helped, because you could tell they after the success of King of the Ring 96, the whole Austin 316 starts taking over. The fans are buying into that. Austin was still very much a heel at that point, so it was the fans that kind of turned him as a face. And what a way to build up that momentum as a face, that transition. You have WrestleMania match against Bret Hart. You lose, but you don't tap out to the sharpshooter. And then you end up having this program with Owen Hart because obviously Austin's, livid. He's embarrassed. Owen Hart pinned me. This doesn't sit right by me. So you have all of that. And I still think, this is my opinion, I still think that Bret and Owen, for me, are partly responsible because of how good they were and the fact that they could put on some great chemistry with Stone Cold, that it really did contribute to the early rise of Austin becoming the huge star that he was in the company. We then go over to Survivor Series 97, which is still, leaves a bad taste in many fans' mouths. It still does with me. And, it's, it is what it is because it's...
Well, let's skip that because that's honestly more of a Bret and...
Yeah, absolutely. But Bret then leaves the company.
Yeah.
Owen stays.
Yeah.
And we've touched on Owen staying. But Owen would then go and have feuds with the likes of D-Generation X in 1998 because Owen would strangely become a part of the Nation of Domination. There was this...
Well, this is after he got buried by DX, so they had to do something with him.
Yeah. And, this is... and I'll tell you something, a personal moment here that I had with Ron Simmons and the Godfather, Carmen Mustafa, in person regarding this whole thing. But yeah, we had this co-leadership almost thing with him and The Rock, and the feud with DX. I mean, it was great fun for what it was, but the one thing I always remember, and I can never get it out of my head, was when we had DX and Jason Sensation, the impersonator, in the ring on Raw, They were all dressed up as members of the Nation, and Jason Sensation, who had already been at ringside a few times, doing his impersonations of various superstars, including Brett and Shawn and Undertaker. But he becomes synonymous with doing this over-the-top Owen Hart impression. And he would bring out this fake nose, and they would work it into the storyline where it would really rile Owen up. And then we have this whole thing where Owen is on the Titantron with The Rock and the rest of the Nation, and he actually threatens Jason Sensation, and he comes down and he absolutely destroys this scrawny guy in the ring, locks him in the sharpshooter. Now, this was incredible selling from Jason Sensation. It was still a weird dynamic seeing Owen going from what he was doing to then being thrown in the Nation, because it had some good moments, but it didn't really... It just seemed a bit out of place, the whole thing. What are your memories of that whole thing?
The only memory is the Jason Sensation stuff, honestly. And I've met you. I've actually got Jason's number here. We should call him sometime. But
I was a big fan of his. I love the stuff he used to do.
We'll see down the line here. But, you know, I think that was a breakout moment of a different kind. Unfortunately, this is also when the Nugget nickname would start. And, you know, Triple H and those guys would again have their fun doing what they do. But I think that because of this and because of the change in Owen's attitude overall, this kind of worked for his eventual pairing with Jeff Jarrett. And I think that this is really where we got to cap it off here, because this is where things eventually end. But the whole Jeff Jarrett run here was probably the other most notable part of Owen's run in his career.
Yeah, I mean, he would face Ken Shamrock. He would defeat Triple H for the European Championship. So he would go there. He would have his rivalry with Ken Shamrock, which went on for a little while. And he beat him to win the European Championship as well. And in April 1998, he defeated The Rock, who was still known as Rocky Maivia, to win the Intercontinental Championship for the second time, which then leads to him teaming with Jeff Jarrett in late 1988. He would end up teaming with Jeff Jarrett, defeating Ken Shamrock and Big Boss Man to win the Tag Team Championship. Owen still showing, even then, when, you know, I thought they were saying about the whole teaming with Jeff Jarrett really brought something, some of the best back out in Owen, because instead of him looking a little bit lost, it was kind of, in my opinion, he started to see more of the Owen Hart that we knew. But of course, we go to Over the Edge in 1998, where tragedy strikes. We all know what happened there, the unfortunate incident that occurred there.
So just to fill in a quick blank here, we do have to talk about how Owen had decided to, quote, quit wrestling after he did a work injury on Dan Severn that reminded him of what he did to Steve Austin.
Yeah.
And so he had taken out Dan Severn, so he quit, and then the Blue Blazer character started showing up. And the Blue Blazer was there, and after Jarrett had a falling out, or not a falling out, I should say, but after Jarrett was kind of doing his own thing with Deborah, Owen was doing this Blue Blazer thing, and that takes us to Over the Edge. Yeah,
he was due to make his entrance from the rafters, and unfortunately the mechanism had activated too soon. And he passed away, which was announced live on air. I still remember the following day, because obviously I had school, no, sorry, I'd finished school. I was, I can't remember where I heard it, but I remember someone saying, because we didn't have the internet, I'd heard there was rumours that Owen had passed throughout the night. Big shock through there. And it's still to this day, remains one of the most heartbreaking moments and days in wrestling history, which is far beyond wrestling storylines and championships. You know, a family loses their husband, their father, their son, their brother, and a dear friend. After all these years, and I want to throw this to you because someone who knows the Hart family has, these incredible moments and stories that you've shared, and which we appreciate. How do you think Owen Hart should ultimately be remembered?
It's tough because I know some of the Hart family. I don't know all of them, and I know that like every family, there's some that think one way and some that think another, and we can't negate his wife and children's feelings in this. And I haven't met them at all. I don't know them at all, and so I don't want to speak for anybody else other than my personal opinion here.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I wish there was some sort of reconciliation that could occur from a personal, selfish standpoint, just so Owen could be lauded and celebrated the way that us fans want to remember him. Excuse me. And I remember Mark Henry making that impassioned plea. But then I also remember, I can't remember if it was Oj or Martha or both coming out and saying, like, with all due respect, we don't have to, and we don't want to, and we're never going to be okay with the company under any ownership that killed our husband, father, making any money of any kind or anything off of this. And not just that, just using Owen's imagery. So seeing the involvement that he's had with AEW has been nice for us wrestling fans, even if it does feel a little, I don't want to say illegitimate, but it doesn't feel
bittersweet in some ways.
Not even bittersweet. It just doesn't feel appropriate.
Yeah.
Because Owen had no affiliation to an AEW at all, right? Like there's no history of histrionics that would tie him to anybody other than Jeff Jarrett works there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I appreciate what AEW does. I've been to the Owen matches. I was at the Owen finals in Calgary, when Ricky Starks beat CM Punk and blew past Jushin Thunder Liger in like 3 seconds. And, it's been different. It's been different, but it still doesn't feel complete. But that's not for us. That's for them to decide. So I think that as hodgepodge as even our own tribute or our own recollection is here, this isn't the first time I've talked about Owen on the podcast feed. I've got a segment with Dave Meltzer from a couple of years ago where we really recapped Owen Hart. But yeah, I think that how we remember him is how we remember him. And until somebody signs off from his family saying otherwise, this is the way it's going to be. And I think as long as we keep talking about him in a way that's respectful and doesn't put any expectations on his family, then I think that that's the fair way to do it.
I couldn't agree more. And as we get ready to close this show, I just think it's important, and again, this is me personally, just to remember that Owen Hart's story isn't defined by the way it ended. Yes, the tragedy of 1999 will always be a part of his story, and it remains one of the most painful moments in wrestling history, as I mentioned. But when I think of Owen Hart, it's not the first thing I think about. I think about this young up-and-comer who fought his way through the Hart Dungeon. I think about this incredible athlete who travelled the world perfecting his craft. I think about the brother who stepped out of his brother Brett's shadow and proved he belonged among wrestling's elite. I think about the classic matches, the championships, the rivalries, the laughter he brought to locker rooms, the stories that his peers forever always talk about, and the respect he earned from virtually everyone who seemed to know him. The more you hear people talk about Owen Hart, the more you realise that while they admired the wrestler, they absolutely loved the man. In an industry often filled with larger-than-life personalities, Owen seemed to leave an impression for a very different reason.
I told this story in depth during that conversation with Meltzer, which you can find on our YouTube, but I wanted to touch on it quickly. Owen Hart, I will always remember for giving me the best advice that I ever got in my life for wrestling, for radio, for everything, and that is be careful who you trust. And he says, don't take anybody at face value. And he wasn't saying this to be mean. He was saying this as a cautionary tale. And he even said, if you want to be a wrestler, that's great, but there are plenty of people that are going to try and take advantage of you. And so just watch your six on that. And that was during the press conference at Canadian Stampede, which was the only time I got to meet him. But it was life advice that I still carry decades later. Thank you, Owen.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And the personal thing I was going to share, which I almost forgot about, was at a convention in London in 2015 when I met Ron Simmons, Charles Wright, who's Godfather. We had this photo shoot where it was Ron Simmons, Godfather, and D'Lo Brown, and we were having our photos together, and I stood in, and we all had the arms raised doing the pose, the sign for Nation of Domination. And Ron Simmons, in front of everybody, because I was actually the first in line to get the photo done, jokes out and goes, "Oh, look, he's the Owen Hart of the photograph." And everyone literally just was in hysterics, and I just went red, and I was like, "Oh my God, you got me, you absolutely got me." And then I look back at it and go, "Was that kind of racist? Maybe," but that was hilarious. It was that moment, and I was like, okay, well, for, I don't know, 20 seconds, I got to be a stand-in for Owen Hart.
Well, you were a bigger cat then too, so at least he didn't call you the Mark Henry.
Well, yeah, that could have been worse. But
all right, take us home here, buddy. Take us home.
Yeah, everyone remembers Owen's kindness. They remember his humour. They remember his generosity. And, of course, all fans will remember that smile. And perhaps the greatest legacy that anyone can leave behind, Owen Hart was a tremendous wrestler. But above all else, as I said before, he's a husband, a father, a son, a brother and a friend. Gone far too soon, but never forgotten. Mike, thanks again for joining us on this journey as we go through the life and career of Owen Hart. Next time we're going to be talking about Hart Foundation, the tag team. So until then, take care of yourselves, and we will see you for our next edition of Legends and Champions.